Gunfire shattered the dawn silence of the San Juan Mountains. Caleb Mercer pressed his spine against cold granite, blood streaming through the fingers clamped over his left shoulder. The bullet had punched clean through the meat-missing bone by half an inch. He had survived worse. Antietam had taught him what real wounds felt like. 12 men spread across the clearing below. 12 rifles. 12 reasons to die on this frozen December morning in 1876. His Winchester Model 1873 held 5 rounds remaining. His Colt Peacemaker held 6, 11 bullets for 12 enemies. The arithmetic of survival had never been so unforgiving. Behind him, his cabin burned. Orange flames clawed at gray sky. Black smoke rolled across the snow like fog from hell itself. Everything he had built over 11 years of mountain solitude was turning to ash. And beneath that burning cabin, hidden in a root cellar he had dug with his own hands, a woman waited. A woman who had stumbled into his life 3 days ago, carrying secrets that powerful men would murder to bury. A voice echoed across the clearing. A voice Caleb recognized from battlefields long past, from mud and blood, and screaming he had spent over a decade trying to forget. "Mercer, send her out. Maybe you walk away from this." Caleb did not answer. He shifted his weight, ignoring the fire in his shoulder, and peered around the boulder's edge. One of the hired guns was creeping up the eastern slope, thinking himself invisible against the white landscape. Caleb raised his Winchester, steadied his breathing the way Daniel Brennan had taught him 20 years ago, when they were young men who believed war was adventure and death happened to other people. He squeezed the trigger. The climber tumbled backward, leaving a crimson trail in pristine snow. 11, Caleb whispered. How had it come to this? The answer waited 3 days in the past. 3 days earlier, December 15th, 1876. Caleb Mercer moved through the forest like smoke through pines. 42 years old. Black hair streaked with gray falling past his shoulders. A beard thick enough to trap morning frost. And a scar running from his right temple down to his jaw. A souvenir from a Confederate bayonet at Antietam Creek 14 years and a lifetime ago. He was tracking a mule deer through fresh powder, 300 pounds of venison that would carry him through January if dressed properly. His Winchester rested easy in his hands, finger alongside the trigger guard. Never on the trigger itself until the moment arrived. Daniel Brennan had drilled that into him during the war. Wait for the moment when the world goes quiet, when your heartbeat is the only sound that matters, when the shot becomes inevitable. The deer stopped in a clearing below, ears forward, alert. Something had spooked it. Caleb lowered his rifle without firing. Deer did not spook for no reason. Not up here where the only predators were hibernating bears and mountain lions too smart to hunt in daylight. He listened. Wind carried a sound that did not belong to these mountains. Metallic chiming, regular, like small bells ringing. 40 yards upslope movement caught his eye. Not animal movement, too deliberate. He tracked the sound to its source. A necklace half buried in a snowdrift. Turquoise stones set in silver strung on braided leather. Apache craftsmanship, sacred work that took months to create. Fresh tracks led away from it. Woman's moccasins, small leather too thin for mountain winter. The stride staggered. Uneven. One footprint showed a red smear. Blood. The trail led toward the north face, toward a 300-foot cliff that dropped onto rocks, sharp enough to shatter bone into powder. Caleb closed his eyes. He lived alone because alone meant safety. No one to fail, no one to watch die while he stood helpless. The mountains asked no questions. They simply existed, and so did he. But those tracks were fresh, 30 minutes old at most, and they led towards certain death. A voice whispered from memory, Daniel's voice warm and certain, the way it had sounded around campfires before battles that killed better men than either of them. You cannot save everyone, Caleb, but you can save someone. He opened his eyes and started climbing. The woman lay curled in a shallow cave where the cliff face had cracked and pulled away from itself. Apache clothing covered her frame, deerskin dress, beaded moccasins, a wool blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders, dark hair matted with blood from a gash above her temple. Someone had struck her with something heavy, gun barrel maybe, or a rock swung hard enough to split skin to bone. Caleb approached from the side rifle ready. War had taught him never to assume, never to trust appearances. Men did terrible things to each other when they believed no one was watching. He knelt at the cave's entrance, built a small fire from kindling he carried in his pack. Did not speak. Words could terrify someone already pushed past breaking. The scrape of flint on steel, tinder catching, first threads of smoke rising. Her breathing changed. She had heard him. Her head turned 1 inch. One eye found him through the firelight. Blue, bright blue, Colorado summer sky blue. Not Apache eyes. Caleb fed the fire until it caught properly, then sat back on his heels with his hands visible and empty. "You are hurt," he said. She watched him without answering, deciding if he meant rescue or something worse. "My name is Caleb Mercer. Found your necklace a mile back. Followed your tracks." He nodded toward the darkness beyond the cave mouth. "North Ridge drops 300 feet onto rocks. Another quarter-mile and you would have walked off the edge." Her eye closed. A single tear cut through blood and grime on her cheek. "I need to check your wounds," Caleb said. "The cold will kill you before dawn if I do not." He moved closer. She did not protest. The head wound looked worse than it was. Scalp cuts bled like slaughtered hogs, but rarely killed. The broken ribs worried him more. 2, maybe 3 on her left side. If bone had punctured lungs, she would drown in her own blood within hours. "Breathe deep." She tried, gasped, shook her head. "Ribs cracked. Need to get you somewhere warm." He studied her face. Late 20s. Pale skin going gray from shock and cold. Delicate bone structure that belonged in Boston drawing rooms, not Colorado wilderness. "You are not Apache," he said. She flinched. "Your hands," he gestured. "Too soft. Apache women work from childhood. Tanning hides, grinding corn. Their hands show decades of labor. Yours do not." Silence stretched between them. Fire crackled. Wind moaned through pines outside. "And your eyes," he continued. "Never seen Apache with that color blue." She studied him for a long moment, making a choice. "Elena Thornwood," she said finally. Her voice came out hoarse, barely louder than the wind. "6 months ago, my uncle Victor murdered my father. Made it look like an accident. Forged documents to steal his shipping company. 30 years of work gone overnight." She struggled upright, gasping against rib pain, and pulled a leather envelope from inside her dress. "My father's real will. Proof Victor forged everything. Ledgers showing $50,000 transferred to a judge named Amos Blackwood over 3 years. Her eyes hardened. "The kind of money that buys murder and calls it legal." Caleb took the envelope. Legal documents, letters, financial records. He understood enough. The Apache disguise. "No one looks twice at a native woman. The men hunting me expect a wealthy white heiress in stagecoaches and hotels. Not a squaw walking through mountains." A ghost smile touched her cracked lips. "My father traded with the Apache for 20 years. I spent summers on their reservation as a girl. Learned enough to pass. Smart. Smart enough to survive 6 months of running." The smile died. "Until 3 days ago." "Who is hunting you?" "A man named Silas Drummond. My uncle pays him $3,000 to bring me back. Dead or alive makes no difference." The name struck Caleb like a rifle butt to the chest. Silas Drummond. They had served together. Same unit, same war, same brotherhood, forged in blood and desperation. Silas had saved his life at Vicksburg, dragged him from a collapsing trench while Confederate shells burst overhead. Caleb had returned the favor at Chattanooga, carrying Silas half a mile through enemy fire after a bullet shattered his leg. They had made promises about after the war, going west together, starting fresh, leaving the killing behind. Then came Antietam, and Captain Blackwood's order to retreat, and Daniel Brennan's screams as Caleb marched away, and Silas standing there in the smoke, saying nothing, doing nothing, letting it happen. "I know him," Caleb said, his voice dropping to something barely human. "Knew him long ago." Elena's eyes widened. "You know Silas Drummond?" "We were soldiers together, before he became a hunter of women, before I became whatever I am now." "What happened between you?" "War happened." His hand moved unconsciously to the scar on his face. "And men like Amos Blackwood." Elena went rigid. "You know Blackwood. Captain Amos Blackwood. Commanded our unit at Antietam. Took Confederate gold to order retreat while we were winning the fight. 23 men died because of that order." Caleb's jaw tightened until tendons stood out like rope. "My best friend died screaming for me to come back while I followed orders and marched away." Understanding dawned in Elena's face. "The judge my uncle wants me to marry," she whispered. "Amos Blackwood, the same man. Made general after the war, then federal judge. Now he wants to be territorial governor." Caleb stood, walked to the cave entrance, stared into the gathering dark. 14 years climbing on the bodies of men who trusted him. The universe had a sense of humor, like a blade between ribs. "They will track you here," he said. "Silas is good. Best tracker I ever knew, except for Daniel. He will follow your trail to this cave, then follow mine to my cabin. Then I should lead them away from you. You would not survive a mile, not with those ribs broken." He turned back to face her. "My cabin sits 5 miles southeast. Log walls 8 inches thick. Stone foundation. Shooting ports on 4 sides. I built it to survive anything the mountains could throw. You built it to hide from the world." "Yes." He did not deny it. "But hiding ends tonight. For both of us." He crossed the cave and knelt beside her. "I am going to carry you down the mountain. It will hurt like hellfire, but staying here means freezing to death, and I did not climb all this way to watch that happen." Elena searched his scarred face with those impossible blue eyes. "Why help me? You owe me nothing." Caleb thought about Daniel, about the promise broken on a battlefield 14 years past, about the voice that still haunted his dreams, asking why he did not come back. "I cannot undo what happened at Antietam," he said quietly. "Cannot bring Daniel home. Cannot make Blackwood pay for what he did. But I can keep you alive. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is how a coward starts becoming something else." Elena gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Then we fight together, whatever comes." Caleb nodded once. He lifted her as gently as broken ribs allowed, felt her gasp against his shoulder, and carried her out of the cave into the frozen dark. Behind them the fire burned to embers and died. Ahead, somewhere in the black wilderness, Silas Drummond was coming. The cabin stood solid against the mountain slope. Caleb had built it himself over 2 summers, cutting logs, hauling stone-laying foundation that would outlast his bones. 8-inch pine walls, iron-reinforced door, 4 shooting ports positioned to cover every approach. A fortress for a man who wanted the world to forget he existed. He laid Elena on his bed, wrapped her in blankets, built the fire high. Then he checked his weapons. Winchester rifle, 15 rounds in the tube. Colt Peacemaker, 6 in the cylinder. Bowie knife with a 12-inch blade sharp enough to shave with. 2 shotguns mounted above the door, both loaded with buckshot. "How many will come?" Elena asked. "Silas had 6 men when he hit the convent. He will bring more this time. Maybe double. 12 against 2, one of us half dead. I have faced worse odds." It was not a boast, just fact. War taught a man what he could survive when survival was the only choice remaining. 3 days they waited. 3 days of watching the tree line for movement. 3 days of Elena growing stronger, ribs mending enough that she could stand without gasping, could hold a rifle steady, could move through the cabin without clutching furniture for support. On the second night, she asked about Daniel. They sat by the fire coffee, warming their hands, whined, howling outside like wolves, calling across frozen valleys. Tell me about him. Your friend who died. Caleb stared into the flames. He had not spoken Daniel's name aloud in 14 years. The words felt foreign in his mouth like a language learned in childhood and long forgotten. Daniel Brennan. We signed up the same day, summer of '61. 23 years old, both of us. Thought we would whip the Confederates by Christmas and be home before the snow fell. A bitter sound escaped his throat, not quite laughter. 4 years later, we were still killing and watching friends die. But Daniel never lost faith, never stopped believing we fought for something that mattered. He used to sing Irish songs around the campfire to keep spirits up, had a voice that could make grown men weep. What happened at Antietam? Caleb's hands tightened on his coffee cup until his knuckles went white. September 17, 1862. Bloodiest single day of the whole damned war. We held a position on the creek, taking fire from 3 directions, but holding steady. Then Captain Blackwood ordered retreat. He set the cup down. His hands were trembling. Daniel refused to leave. Wounded men who could not walk were trapped behind us. He said he would carry them out himself if he had to. Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. I should have stayed with him. Should have told Blackwood to go to hell and his orders with him. Instead, I followed the retreat like a good soldier. Marched away while my best friend screamed my name. You could not have known I knew. The word came out sharp as a blade. I knew something was wrong, knew we could hold that position, but I was scared, and my fear killed Daniel as surely as any Confederate bullet. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Blackwood gave the order. Blackwood took the bribe. The guilt belongs to him. Blackwood gave the order. I obeyed it. Caleb met her eyes across the firelight. Every man faces moments when he must choose between orders and conscience. I made the wrong choice. I have to live with that. Then honor Daniel now. Her voice softened. Honor him by choosing differently. Dawn of the third day. Caleb heard them before he saw them. Hoofbeats muffled by snow. Dogs baying in the distance. Not 6 men this time. Many more. He moved to the window, staying to the side where he could not be seen from outside. Counted the riders as they emerged from the tree line. 12. Silas had doubled his force. Silas Drummond rode at the front, broader than memory, older gray threading through his black beard, but still carrying himself like a man who owned whatever ground his horse stood on. Behind Silas rode 2 men in expensive city coats that had no business on a mountain in winter. One was silver-haired with soft merchant's hands and a gut that spoke of rich food and easy living. Victor Thornwood. The other sat ramrod straight despite his 70 years cold eyes sweeping the cabin with a soldier's assessment of terrain and threat. Caleb knew those eyes, had seen them on battlefields, had seen them in nightmares. Amos Blackwood. Elena. Root cellar. Now. She wanted to argue. He saw it flash across her face, but she was practical above all else, and practicality, said dead witnesses, testified to nothing. She crossed to the bearskin rug, lifted the hidden trap door, and disappeared into darkness. Caleb let the rug fall back into place. Then he opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Silas Drummond smiled when he saw him. The smile did not reach his eyes. Caleb Mercer, 11 years since anyone saw you come down from this mountain. Started to think you had died up here and nobody bothered to bury the body. Silas! Caleb kept his Winchester loose at his side, barrel pointed at Snowfinger resting against the guard. Long way from Vicksburg. Long way from everything that mattered. Silas gestured at the cabin, the peaks, the endless white wilderness. Heard you went half wild. Living like a bear. Forgot how to talk to humans. I talk fine when I have something worth saying. The silver-haired man pushed his horse forward. Victor Thornwood, his face arranged in an expression of concerned benevolence that fooled no one. Mr. Mercer, I am Victor Thornwood. I believe you have encountered my niece Elena. The poor girl is very ill. Her father's death unbalanced her mind. I am here to bring her home for proper care. Caleb said nothing. Victor's smile flickered. She has stolen documents from my company, made wild accusations, delusions of a grief-stricken mind, nothing more. She seems to know exactly what she is saying, says you murdered her father, forged his will, stole his company, paid a federal judge $50,000 to make the theft look legal. Victor's face hardened. Lies, the ravings of a disturbed woman. Then let her speak those lies in open court. Let 12 honest men decide who is lying and who is telling truth. The tall man nudged his horse forward. Amos Blackwood, 70 years old but still straight as a rifle barrel, still wearing authority like a coat that fit perfectly. Mr. Mercer. His voice carried the flat certainty of a man accustomed to his words becoming law. I am Federal Judge Amos Blackwood. I hold legal custody papers for Elena Thornwood, declared mentally incompetent by courts in Boston. You are obstructing federal authority. Stand aside. Caleb looked at this man who had murdered 23 soldiers for Confederate gold, who had built a career on betrayal and called it service, who had climbed to power over the body of Daniel Brennan. I know exactly who you are, Judge. Captain Amos Blackwood, 4th Pennsylvania Infantry. You commanded us at Antietam. Something flickered behind Blackwood's cold eyes. Recognition, perhaps fear. You ordered retreat while 23 of your own men were fighting for their lives, took Confederate gold to abandon a position we could have held. Caleb's voice carried across the clearing like the crack of a whip. My friend Daniel Brennan died because of that order. Died screaming for me to come back while I marched away following your command. Blackwood's face went the color of old bone. I have no idea what you are talking about. I was decorated for valor at Antietam. Decorated with blood money, promoted by men you bribed or blackmailed. Caleb raised his rifle slightly, not pointing at anyone yet, but close enough. And now you want to murder another innocent person to keep climbing. Keep stealing. Keep pretending you are something other than the coward you have always been. Victor's voice rose to a shriek. This is absurd. Silas, take him. Search the cabin. Find her. Silas had not moved. He sat his horse with an expression Caleb could not read, watching the confrontation unfold like a man seeing a play he had witnessed before. Silas, Victor turned to him. I am paying you $3,000. Earn it. Slowly, Silas dismounted. His hand rested on the butt of his pistol, but he did not draw. Caleb, his voice came out quiet, almost gentle. You cannot win this. 12 against 1. Even you cannot beat those odds. I have survived worse. Not like this. Silas glanced at Victor and Blackwood. These men have money and law on their side. They can kill you and call it justice. Walk away. Pretend you never saw the woman. Like you walked away from Daniel. The words hit Silas like a physical blow. His face twisted. You do not know what happened? I know you stood there while he died, took Blackwood's money to keep quiet about the retreat, sold your honor for silver while Daniel's blood soaked into the ground. Blackwood threatened my sister. The words stopped Caleb cold. Margaret was 16, living in St. Louis. Blackwood showed me a photograph of her walking home from school, told me where she lived, who her friends were, what time she came home every evening. Silas's voice had gone raw. Said if I talked about what really happened at Antietam, she would meet with an accident. A tragic accident that no court would ever call murder. Caleb stared at his old friend. So I took the money. Every year for 12 years, I took Blackwood's payments and kept my mouth shut and watched him become a general and then a judge, because I was terrified of what he would do to Margaret if I spoke truth. Why tell me now? Because Margaret died last year. Cancer. Nothing to do with Blackwood or his threats. Silas reached inside his coat and pulled out a leather-bound journal. And when she was gone, I realized I had sold my soul for nothing. Traded Daniel's memory and your friendship for a sister who never knew she was in danger. He held up the journal. 12 years of records. Every payment Blackwood made. Every man he bribed. Every soldier who died because of his orders. Enough evidence to hang him twice over. Blackwood's hand moved toward the pistol at his hip. You are finished, Drummond. I will see you hang for this. Maybe. Silas smiled and something like peace crossed his weathered face. But I will die telling truth. That is more than you can say. Blackwood drew. Silas drew faster. His shot took Blackwood in the right shoulder, spinning the old man sideways in his saddle. Blackwood's pistol discharged wild into the air as he tumbled from his horse. Everything happened at once. Victor screamed orders. The hired guns reached for weapons. Caleb threw himself sideways through the cabin door as bullets splintered wood above his head. He came up firing through the nearest gun port. One man down. A second clutched his chest and fell. Outside chaos erupted. Horses screaming. Men shouting. The deep boom of Silas's revolver answered by the crack of rifles. Caleb moved port to port with cold precision. Each shot placed. Each bullet finding its target. 11 years of solitary hunting had honed his skills sharper than any whetstone. 3 more men fell, but 7 remained, and one had a torch. He saw the flame arc through gray morning air, saw it land on the stack of firewood against the east wall. Dry pine caught instantly. Within seconds, smoke poured through gaps in the logs. 5 rounds left in the Winchester, 6 in the Colt, 7 enemies outside. Cabin burning around him. The mathematics of death had shifted against him. Then a new sound cut through the gunfire. Hoofbeats approaching fast from the north. A single rider. A young voice rang across the clearing, strong and clear, and full of rage. My name is Daniel Brennan, and you are murdering my father's best friend. Caleb's heart seized in his chest. Through smoke-stained glass, he saw a young man, 16, maybe 17, riding hard out of the tree line. Dark hair, stubborn jaw, and eyes that Caleb recognized because he had seen them every night in his dreams for 14 years. Daniel's eyes, looking out from Daniel's son. The boy fired as he rode old Springfield rifle barking. 2 hired guns dropped before they understood where death was coming from. Silas saw the opening. He turned his pistol on Victor Thornwood. Game ends here, Victor. Victor's face contorted with fury and terror. You work for me, I paid you. Not anymore. Silas cocked the hammer. Never again. Blackwood, bleeding from his shoulder wound, had retrieved his pistol with his left hand. He raised it with shaking arm and fired. The bullet took Silas in the chest. He staggered, did not fall. Caleb stepped through the cabin door, raised his Winchester, fired. His shot shattered Blackwood's left hand. The pistol spun away into bloody snow. Blackwood collapsed screaming. The 5 remaining hired guns looked at each other. Their employer was down. Their leader had turned against them. Half their number lay dead or dying. They ran. In 30 seconds, silence returned to the clearing. Only the crackle of burning cabin and the moans of wounded men broke the mountain stillness. Caleb crossed the bloody snow to where Silas had fallen. His old friend lay on his back, breath coming in wet rattles, blood spreading beneath him in a widening pool. But his eyes were clear, focused. Why? Caleb asked. Silas coughed. Crimson flecked his lips. Owed Daniel a debt I could never pay. His voice came out in gasps. This was closest I could come. He pressed the leather journal into Caleb's hands. Everything is there. Every crime, every name. Make sure the world knows what Blackwood truly is. His eyes found Caleb's, held them. Tell Daniel's boy. Tell him I am sorry. I was weak when strength mattered most. But maybe this counts for something. His eyes closed. He did not open them again. The young man, Daniel's son, approached with his rifle still ready, watching Victor and Blackwood with the cold assessment of someone who had learned young that the world held monsters in human shape. My name is Daniel Brennan, Jr., he said. My father was Sergeant Daniel Brennan. He wrote letters about you during the war, about Caleb Mercer, his closest friend, the bravest man he ever knew. Caleb stood slowly. The cabin collapsed behind him with a roar of sparks and timber, 11 years of solitude returning to ash. How did you find me? Spent 3 years searching since I turned 14 and decided I was old enough to find the man my father loved like a brother. The boy's voice cracked. My mother died when I was 5. Never knew my father. All I have are his letters and the stories my uncle told. Everyone mentioned you. Caleb felt something burning in his eyes, tears he had not shed in 14 years. I failed your father, left him to die when I should have stayed. You followed orders because that is what soldiers do. He stayed because that is who he was. Young Daniel stepped closer. But you did not stop being who you are. You survived. You saved this woman when you could have walked away. My father would call that redemption. The trapdoor opened. Elena emerged from the cellar coughing smoke, taking in the carnage with wide eyes. Is it finished? Caleb looked at Silas's body, at the journal clutched in his hand, at the boy with his father's eyes and his father's courage. No, he said, it is just beginning. They rode into Silverton at noon. The mining town sprawled across a narrow valley, 30 buildings lining a mud-churned main street. Smoke rose from chimneys. The stink of coal and horse dung hung thick in winter air. People stopped to stare as the strange procession passed. A mountain man unseen for 11 years. A woman in men's clothing riding astride like she was born to the saddle. A boy with an old rifle and eyes too hard for his young face. And 2 wealthy men bound to their horses like common outlaws, one bleeding from a shattered hand, both looking like the world had ended. Marshal Levi Coltrane waited on the porch of his office, gray-haired, leather-faced, wearing his star like a man who understood the weight it carried. Caleb Mercer, thought you froze to death up that mountain. Not yet, Levi. Coltrane's eyes moved to the prisoners, widened when he recognized Blackwood. That is federal judge Amos Blackwood. Was a judge. Now he is a murderer, traitor, and thief awaiting trial. Caleb handed over the leather journal. 12 years of evidence. Every bribe. Every man he killed or had killed. Every crime he committed, climbing from captain to general to judge. Coltrane paged through the journal. His weathered face went grimmer with each entry. This will bring down half the territorial government. Good. It needs bringing down. The hearing convened in St. Michael's Church 3 hours later. Not a formal trial that would come later in Denver with lawyers and procedures, but the people of Silverton demanded to hear truth spoken aloud. Over 150 crammed into the small wooden building, filling pews and lining walls, breath-fogging in cold air. Elena spoke first. She told them everything. Her father's murder, the forged will, the forced engagement to Blackwood. 6 months of running and hiding and nearly dying in mountains that did not forgive weakness. Then others rose. Ruth Angevine, the general store widow, whose husband had lost everything in a lawsuit, Blackwood decided for the highest bidder. Old Ezekiel Whitmore, who watched his silver claim stolen by a company that paid Blackwood to rule against him. John Hastings, whose brother died in a water rights dispute. Blackwood settled with blood money. Story after story, victim after victim. A lifetime of corruption laid bare in plain wooden pews. Daniel Brennan Jr. spoke last. He stood before miners and farmers and shopkeepers, a 16-year-old boy carrying the weight of a dead father's legacy on his thin shoulders. Sergeant Daniel Brennan, Union Army. He died at Antietam on September 17, 1862. His voice rang clear through the crowded church. He died because Captain Amos Blackwood took Confederate gold to order retreat, died trying to save wounded men, while his commanding officers sold their lives for profit. He turned to face Blackwood, pale and sweating in his chains. You killed my father to protect your secrets, spent 14 years pretending to be a hero, while good men carry guilt for following your orders. The boy's chin lifted. But truth comes out eventually. My father's name will be cleared, and yours will be remembered for what it truly is. The name of a coward who murdered his own soldiers for gold. The church erupted in shouted approval. Marshal Coltrane called for order. Victor Thornwood, you are charged with murder, fraud, and conspiracy, held for trial before the Territorial Circuit Court. Victor slumped in his seat, broken. Amos Blackwood, you are charged with treason, corruption, and accessory to murder. Your judicial authority is suspended pending trial. Blackwood tried to stand. Deputies forced him down. This is absurd. I am a decorated war hero, a federal judge. You cannot, I can. Coltrane leaned close. Because I was there too, Blackwood. Lieutenant Levi Coltrane, 4th Pennsylvania Infantry. I saw you take those meetings before Antietam, saw money change hands, spent 14 years wondering if I was coward for staying silent. His voice hardened. Not anymore. 3 weeks later, Caleb stood in the ashes of his burned cabin, studying what remained. Charred logs, melted snow. The stone foundation he had laid with his own hands still solid beneath the destruction. Going to rebuild, young Daniel stood beside him, stronger now after 3 weeks of real food and purposeful work. Yes, bigger this time. Why bigger? Caleb thought about Daniel Brennan Sr., about letters his friend had written during the war, talking about dreams for after, teaching children, building something that mattered. Your father wanted to run a school, take in orphans and boys nobody else wanted, teach them to read and write, teach them how to survive and how to live right. He picked up a piece of charred wood, turned it in his hands. I am not a teacher, but I know survival, know the difference between following orders and following conscience. There are boys in these mountains who need to learn both. You want me to help build it? Caleb looked at the boy with his father's eyes. I want you to help run it. You are Daniel Brennan's son, his blood, his legacy. Nobody better to carry on what he wanted to build. Young Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. I spent 3 years looking for you, hoping to find the man my father loved, hoping to understand why he died believing in something. He met Caleb's eyes. I think I understand now. Footsteps approached through the snow. Elena, dressed in practical wool color, returned to her cheeks. News from Denver. Governor ordered full investigation into Blackwood. Every case he decided in 10 years is being reviewed. Good. Victor is talking, naming everyone he bribed, everyone who helped cover up my father's murder. A grim smile touched her lips. He kept records too. My uncle was always thorough in his crimes. She looked at the ashes at the foundation, at the 2 men standing amid the ruins. I sold my father's company. $65,000, more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. She paused. So I am going to use it the way he would have wanted, a fund for war orphans named after Daniel Brennan, in a hospital here in Silverton. Nearest doctor is 50 miles away. People die from wounds that should be survivable. Young Daniel's eyes glistened but did not overflow. Thank you, he said. My father would be honored. Your father saved good people during the war. This is my way of continuing what he started. Sunset Caleb stood on the ridge above his burned cabin, watching the sky turn gold and crimson over western peaks. Young Daniel stood beside him, comfortable silence between them, the kind of silence that did not need filling with words. "Do you think he is watching?" the boy asked. "My father—" Caleb considered the question. War had burned most of his faith to ash, but standing here in mountains that had witnessed 1,000 generations of human struggle, he felt something larger than himself. Call it God, call it fate, call it simply the weight of choices that led to this moment. "I think the people we love never truly leave us," he said. "They live in memory, in the choices we make, in the way we try to be better because they believed we could be." "He believed in you." "Yes, and for 14 years, I tried to forget that, tried to hide from the man he thought I was." Caleb turned to face Daniel's son. "No more hiding, no more running. I am going to build something worth leaving behind. That is how I honor him." Young Daniel nodded slowly. "That is all I ever wanted, to make my father proud." "Then we will figure it out together." In the valley below, lights flickered on in Silverton's windows, miners coming home to families, shopkeepers closing doors, children called in from the cold, life continuing, the way it always did. Tomorrow Caleb would start building again, cutting timber, laying stone, creating a place where boys with nothing could learn to become men with purpose. It would not bring Daniel back. Nothing could do that, but it would mean something, would make a difference. And in the end, that was all any man could hope for. The mountains stood eternal, patient witnesses to human struggle and triumph. The past remained immovable as stone. The scars would never fully vanish, but Caleb Mercer, who had spent 11 years hiding from his failures, had finally stopped running. Not because he had forgotten Daniel Brennan, because he had finally found a way to honor him. If you enjoyed this tale of the Old West, let us know in the comments below. Next week, we bring you the story of a different kind of hero, a lawman who stood alone against the deadliest outlaw gang in Colorado history. Until then, may your trails stay clear and your powder stay dry.